I'd run out of batteries, so James is still talking about 20 days in Mariupol, and I don't know where exactly when the batteries ran out, so good luck, James. Go ahead.
Where to start? Okay, already watching a lot of stuff. Anyway, 20 days in Mariupol. Earlier when Pauline was talking about food and movies and stuff like that, saying everything was wonderful except for this. Everything is wonderful except for this show. Yeah. Ray Stevens back in the day. Was that 1970? Everything was wonderful except for that song. It wasn't that bad. It certainly wasn't that good. Anyway, this is put out by Associated Press, AP, I think that's what that stands for. And ultimately it's put out by PBS, Public Broadcasting System, in the United States. So The Guardian actually comes out in support of this. The Guardian is
You're not getting anything.
traditionally been kind of like fellow travelers. Manchester, is it Manchester Guardian? Yeah, fellow travelers. And stuff like that. I'm really not terribly sympathetic with their general view, for example, of Israel and so on and so forth. Anyway, a brave, visceral, merciless masterpiece. Enough adjectives to choke a horse. Wall Street Journal, which is a pretty right-wing sort of thing. I think they kind of were supporting Donald Trump. Really stupid. Anyway, Wall Street Journal is supposed to be about capitalism.
Oh boy, those flies love your...
Donald Trump is not a capitalist. Oh, you got that clear, Wall Street Journal? He's not a capitalist. He's mafia. Now, he's not a mafia don. That is an indication of how much a flunk he is. He's a mafia figurehead. Originally, he and his dad were mafia figureheads in the real estate industry in a market in New York City. And now he's morphed to the biggest mafia mob ever in the world, from what I can tell. The Russian mob. And stuff like that, front for them. So he's not, understand, Donald Trump is not about MAGA, make America great again. It's make America a colony again. So the Americans sacrificed a lot of blood and I guess a significant amount of treasure way back in 1775, 76, all the way up to 1783, I think, was when the Revolutionary War occurred. They call that the War of Independence now. Is that what they call it? But it was a Revolutionary War. And now, like it's almost 150 years later, Donald Trump just wants to put everything on all of the United States, 17 to 20% of the world's economy, surrender it. He wants to submit Vladimir Putin, who commands maybe, 6% of the world economy? Less. 1/3 of the American economy, or less. Wow. What a coward. Donald Trump. I understand there's lots of you folks out there south of the border. There's quite a few north of the border here, Canada. I think, man, that guy's smarter than you. No, he ain't smarter than me. He's smarter than you, his supporters. You guys are really stupid. Because Donald Trump is a drooling idiot and he's a coward. Make America a colony again. And you're going to vote for him. It looks as though you're going to get him elected again. Wow. And understand, folks, it's CIA. You guys are paranoid about the CIA? The American military is watching Donald Trump. Oh, maybe there's a lot of guys that, we'll do well under Trump in the American military. And it's possible. One of those idiots might have a coup. But anyone in the American military who has any sense of the power of the United States, economic and military, will not have any truck with anyone who's going to surrender the United States to the Soviet Union Mark II or Russia. Russia's a flunky country. Putin's a flunky little tin pot dictator. You think the American military is going to sit back and let him take over the United States? Maybe. It's possible.
So how
But you watch. I'm putting my money on if Trump makes a false move, and he's a stupid, drooling putz. They'll just move him aside. They'll have a coup, and they'll have military dictatorship for a while. It'll be an enlightened military dictatorship by comparison to pretty well any other military dictatorship you could have out there. But the Trumpies, you militias, you better load up on guns because they're going to be taking your stuff away. You think you're on the side of the U.S. military? They're watching you like hawks. You stupid idiots.
Okay, so do you like snow peas on pizza? Did this work or no?
Oh, it's great.
Okay. Boy, that fly is really wanting your pizza.
It's suicidal. It's like Donald Trump or anything. Anyway, back to this. I like eating the pizza too much. We didn't talk about this. So they have a kind of like a spoiler alert at the beginning. It's something like if you have a queasy kind of stomach, don't watch this. Now, it could be fake news. You know, they had a couple of Russian sources talking about the very footage that was coming out of Mariupol. It's a weird thing about the Slavic languages. Like they'll end a word with L, and then you've got to palatalize it.
Weird.
So I just noticed that the way it was written in the Ukrainian.
All right. Well, you have 21 minutes.
Yeah. This arm is just going to be so exercised from waving that fly away. It's like a spit house fly. That's the last thing we did. I just stunned him, but now he's gone. No. Oh. That one was a little more circumspect. Anyway, there's a lot of gruesome footage in this thing. And the Russian response was, fake news! Fake news! Yeah. So early on, they've got, in the wake of the Russian onslaught, first day, I guess, of bombing and shelling, they got a kid in more or less a makeshift bomb shelter. Don't know if it's a boy or a girl. Quite small. Maybe 5 or 6, 7, 8 maybe. Anyway, real acting, eh? They were saying, the Russians went, oh, this is all acting. Boy, they sure must have been treating that kid with tear gas or something like that. He's crying. He or she was crying. Saying, I don't want to die. Real acting. Yeah, right. They were showing one little kid. It might have been a dummy. I don't know. 18 months old. Getting a shock, trying to get the heart going. Didn't work. Well, maybe it was just a dummy. I don't think so. Well, the kid was called Kirill, which is the Ukrainian version of Cyril. His mother was an awesome actress, I'm telling you. Crying like crazy. I'm being ironic, I hope you recognize it. One woman was shown I don't know, they were kind of blurring out stuff. Maybe it was all huge makeup. She's pregnant. Had her pelvis blown out. Lost her baby. Lost her own life. Fun times. That's when the Ruskies bombed and or shelled the maternity hospital. Wow! Talk about revolutionary terrorism. Go, Russians, go, you big, brave, masculine muttheads. Go. Take out a maternity hospital. Woo. Absolutely disgusting. You know, I was mentioning before the battery went up, a benighted individual who was saying that in 2014 Russia had a right to Ukraine, and Putin was our ally in a war against terror. Even then, Russian terrorism had been going for 3 years in Syria. Roughly 3 years. Started 2011. But what I said was, no, Putin's the biggest terrorist of the 21st century. Now he's added to the bill. You Russians, this gets you through to you folks in Russia. This ain't fake news. However much Putin might say it, however much you might think it, they're yapping fake news like Donald Trump. They're all fakers. You Russians, absolutely shameful. I'm basically a pacifist unless people get attacked. And then, well, you know, pacifism to me is democracy. But, you know, people have to defend democracy. And you Russian folks, you look at the terrorist regimes really you've been supporting since 1917 with a little respite for 9 years between 1991 and 2000. Absolutely shameful. If someone said that Russians deserve to be wiped out, at least the ones that haven't escaped, I'd kind of say, well, I don't know if I'd stand up very strongly for their right to survive. I don't want to say it myself. If someone else said it, I'd say, no. Absolutely shameful. Absolutely shameful. You have got to overthrow that terrorist regime of yours, Putin and the other KGB agents and the Russian mob that works hand in bloody hand with those KGB agents. Absolutely shameful. You know, other countries have had people like England, the United States, when they were getting rid of British relative oppression in their War of Independence or Revolutionary War, whatever you want to call it or don't want to call it. It was both. They had to lose. They had to lose their lives. And what they did, actually, when they did that in England, the United States, they actually made those countries less liable to thump neighboring parts of the world. An example is the United States vis-a-vis Canada. Canada has existed even before it technically started existing in 1867 in relative peace with the United States since 1812. Yeah, how good is your so-called math? It's really arithmetic. That's over 200 years. It's like 212 years. Why is that? Like, the United States could just take over Canada. Could have, right from the beginning, 1867. The Brits trusted the Americans so much, they forced the Russians to sell Alaska. They didn't trust the Russians. Who would? They were bad then, of course, they're worse now. Forced the Russians to sell Alaska to the United States. So basically they gave Canada 2 boundaries with the United States. Usually that's a formula for disaster. The United States is so, yeah, people are going to go, wow, what's that about? The United States, what's he saying when he says this? The United States is stunningly Pacific. That doesn't mean that they're on the Pacific Ocean. Peaceful, peace-loving, relatively speaking. You mess with them enough, and up until Donald Trump, they would hammer you. And they did. You know, people are saying, oh, they never lost the war until the Vietnamese War. The Vietnamese War was a theater of battle in a huge war, very long, and worldwide, called the Cold War. Who won that? The Americans did. They retreated in Vietnam. Jesus. You know, they creamed the Russians without really slaughtering them. They let the Russians kind of like dry up and blow away. So incompetent. Well, anyway, back in 2022, I was calling for the dissolution of the Russian Empire. I'm calling for it now. Still, Russia controls a lot of oil resources. It doesn't own them, not legally. The big oil resources on Siberia. Russia has no right to any land, no scrap of land to the east of the Ural, or as English people tend to say, Ural Mountains. Not a scrap. Not a crumb. I'm calling for you folks all the way from the Ural Mountains to the Sea of Okhotsk, to the Bering Strait, to rebel and kick these dumb chimps out. I'm calling for Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania to expel every Russian, really. That's what has to get done. From within their borders. Can't have happened to them what happened in the Ukraine. Ukraine should have been getting Russian colonists out of the Crimean Peninsula, out of the eastern part of the Ukraine. They're not native there. They're not native there. And in the long run, I'm calling for the area around the Don River mouth to be repatriated back to the Ukraine, a long way down the road. It's Ukrainian territory. If it's anyone's, definitely not Russian. The Russians didn't get access to the Black Sea until the time of Peter the Great. Yeah, that's 300 years ago. But he took it by force. No right. Russians have no right to any sea borders. I'm calling for the people in the northern part of so-called Russia and Europe to take away Murmansk. That area is not native Russian. That area is populated by people who are related to the Finns, Laplanders, Estonians, stuff like that. That's who the natives are. Russians have no right to be there. Russians should not have access to any ports anywhere in the world. They don't have a right to Leningrad. I call for the Finns to take back Viborg. It's actually, from what I can tell, a Swedish name. And they should mine the access to the mouth of the Neva River. I wouldn't like to see, well, I actually would like to see Russians forced out of Leningrad. But, you know, I don't believe in huge population transfers and stuff like that. I do believe when people are dangerous, like in Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, it should have happened in the Ukraine, all Russians out. You know, like it should be done in a humane fashion. You know, people shouldn't be subjected to unnecessary force. You know, it's here where you go. We're not putting you in cattle cars. We'll put you in nice, luxurious trains and stuff like that, and we'll do it nice and slowly. Russians approved, the eastern part of the Ukraine. It can't be trusted. It's in 2014. And also in the Crimea, and in 2022, more of the same. That can't be allowed to happen anywhere in the world anymore. I call for the dissolution of the Russian Empire. It used to be called the Prison of Nations when it was a kind of a royal, a dynastic empire. It's an even more vicious empire. Perhaps even more vicious than it was under the commies generally. I don't know if Putin's quite as bad as Stalin. From what I've seen, he's way worse than Brezhnev, Andropov, Chernenko. They didn't have much of a chance to do much evil ever in such a short time. Definitely worse than Gorbachev. A little less fly-by-night than Khrushchev, but I think worse than Khrushchev. And worse, amazingly enough, than Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, otherwise known as Lenin. Lenin's just a nickname. I think it was adopted by Lenin himself, I think it means. He of the Lena River. He was exiled way up to Siberia. The Lena River is in Siberia. Anyway, this is kind of like required viewing for anyone who's got the stomach for it. I've still got kind of like a headache from it, but it's a headache like a toothache or something like that. How much time? 3?
7 minutes.
7 minutes. Anyway, it's full of atrocities. You know, like the Russians are saying they're actors. You look at the buildings of Mariupol, maybe it's all Photoshop. And this is after day 20. The siege went on 86 days. And finally, the Russians took over. 86 days? Geez, that's almost 3 months. I hate to think what the buildings look, because it was starting to look a little bit like Berlin at the end of World War II after 20 days. That's only less than a quarter of the siege in. This is what Putin did in Syria, presumably in Georgia, Syria starting 2011. Georgia, I think it started 2008, maybe 2007. It's just mass vandalism. A lot of people killed. Seems to have a fatal attraction for hospitals. You're such a coward, Putin, you stupid slime. The same MO every time. Says it's going to be over. No, a little while. Not working out. So he does the Hitler thing. Hitler was really big on shelling. You can do a lot of damage just with shelling, not high tech. So he just goes and makes a ruin heap of a place he's besieging. Makes sure the water's cut off, make sure the power is cut off, make sure the gas is cut off, make sure he attacks when people need the heat almost a month, late February. Still technically winter. You can see, maybe it's Photoshop, but there's snow on the ground. Some of the shots that are taken early into March. Shameful. Absolutely shameful. And to think there were nifty, shifty, hefty lefties supporting Putin when he stomped in there. Guys like Oliver Stone. Guys like my unnamed respondent back in 2014. When are you guys going to grow up? You know, like you folks on the left wing, the ones that are like in Oliver Stone territory. When are you actually going to look at the world I don't care what you read in novels. I don't care what you see in stupid Luis Buñuel movies and stuff like that. I don't care what you see in stuff done by, I guess, till his death, the commie Pablo Picasso. I don't care what you see in that sort of stuff. You've actually got to start looking at reality. Some people actually did a little bit, like George Orwell. Even before then, André Gide was smarter than George Orwell. He was blowing the whistle on the Soviet Union. I think he went over to, because he was semi-enthused. In the 30s. Maybe not quite 10 years before George Orwell. What was wrong with George Orwell? What took him so long? Arthur Koestler. He actually was so stupid he went over and volunteered to be a Russian, or didn't go over, I don't know where he went, but volunteered to be a commie agent. Eventually turned on him. Compare and contrast with a left-winger called Bertrand Russell. He went to jail. He was a conscientious objector in World War I. Because he was saying, I guess he wasn't terribly religious, if at all. Probably an atheist, if not an agnostic. So he couldn't claim conscientious objector status. Went to jail. World War I. He was anti-nukes, I guess in the 60s, maybe even the 50s. 1918, I believe it is. I've got an essay written about it, by him, about communism. He calls it Bolshevism. What he says is, it's awful. Basically, the only thing I can really compare it with, in terms of its awfulness, is, in other words, its tendency towards tyranny, is Islam. Really politically incorrect. Amongst lefties, doubly politically incorrect nowadays even. But yeah, that's just the truth, as Lily Tomlin used to say. Yeah, take it. That's the truth. Ain't fake news or anything like that. He knew. Bertrand Russell knew. 1918, 1919. I don't think it was as early as 1917. He knew. What is that? It's like 20 years before André Gide. Almost 30 years, let's say 25 before George Orwell. What's wrong with you lefties? What is wrong with you? You can't go around looking at things through rose-colored glasses. How much time, too?
Oh, no. 18 seconds.
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
So put that in your hash pipes and smoke it, lefties.